9 businesses. None of them have a logo you would recognize. None of them were featured in a pitch deck or a TechCrunch article. Nobody at a dinner party has ever asked to invest. The names are things like Tri-State Commercial Cleaning, Lakewood Pest Solutions, and Henderson Document Shredding. The owner, a person we will call Marcus, not the Marcus from the excerpt, a different one, did not inherit money. Did not go to a top business school. Did not raise a seed round. He bought 9 businesses that nobody else wanted and now takes home $1.6 million a year. That number is real. It is also specific, and the specificity matters more than the size. Before anything else, take home needs a definition. Revenue is the top line. What a business collects before it pays anyone or anything. A commercial cleaning company with 12 contracts generating $2.4 million in annual billings has $2.4 million in revenue. That is not what Marcus takes home. Profit is what remains after expenses. Payroll, insurance, fuel, supplies, equipment leases, software, the accountant who catches the thing the other accountant missed. Owner earnings is a more precise concept. It is the cash the business generates that the owner could extract without impairing operations. Reinvest to grow, fine. But if you stopped reinvesting tomorrow and just ran the thing, what would land in your account? Cash flow is the rhythm of that arrival. Monthly, seasonal, lumpy sometimes, predictable in aggregate. When this script says $1.6 million take home, it means owner earnings across 9 businesses, after all operating costs, after debt service on the loans used to acquire them, after the managers who run the day-to-day are paid. What lands? What is real? Now the core of why this works. Boring businesses are frequently mispriced. Not because the underlying economics are weak. Because perception discounts them before the numbers are ever run. A staffing company that places temporary warehouse workers is not exciting. A company that calibrates industrial scales for food manufacturers is not exciting. A business that provides outsourced mailroom services to mid-sized law firms is genuinely the opposite of exciting. And because they are not exciting, the universe of buyers is small. The universe of buyers willing to do serious diligence on them is smaller. The universe of buyers who understand how to value owner-operator cash flows, account for key person risk, and structure earnouts appropriately is smaller still. That small universe is the opportunity. Perception is not a fundamental. Revenue is a fundamental. Retention rate is a fundamental. Customer concentration is a fundamental. The story a business tells at a cocktail party is not a fundamental. When those two things diverge, and in boring businesses they diverge constantly, there is a gap. That gap is where the acquisition price lives. The businesses in this portfolio are local services and B2B basics. Commercial cleaning, pest control, document management, a small HVAC maintenance company serving light industrial clients, a landscaping business with municipal contracts, a medical billing and coding operation handling a cluster of independent physician practices, a uniform rental and laundry service, a courier and last-mile delivery company with regional logistics contracts, a water treatment equipment service business. Not one of these was started in a garage with a vision for disrupting an industry. Not one of them benefits from network effects or viral loops or TAM projections in the billions. What they have instead is this: recurring contracts, essential services, low glamour, and customers who do not want to switch providers because switching is a headache and the incumbent shows up on time. This is not a story about venture capital. It is not a story about riding a trend cycle, identifying the next wave, or building a platform. Those paths exist and some people walk them well. This story is about a different kind of patient capital applied to a different kind of asset. The comparison is not unfair. It is simply not applicable. Different rules, different timelines, different risk profiles. The arc of how this portfolio was built follows a pattern that matters. The first acquisition is the hardest, not operationally, though it is operationally demanding. Psychologically, you are buying a thing that generates real cash from real customers, and the price is real money, typically financed through an SBA loan, seller financing, or a combination, and for the first 6 months you are learning what you do not know at a pace that is uncomfortable but survivable. The first business builds confidence. More than that, it builds a system. A due diligence checklist, a transition playbook, a set of questions you now know to ask because you learned them the hard way on deal 1. The second acquisition is faster, the third faster still. By the 5th or 6th, the system runs the acquisition as much as you do. That is not an accident. That is the entire point. Confidence compounds through repeatability, not through inspiration. But the trade-offs need to be on the table from the beginning, because leaving them out would be dishonest. These businesses have operational headaches. A key employee leaves 2 weeks after closing and takes institutional knowledge out the door with them. A municipal contract is not renewed and revenue drops 18% in 1 quarter. Seasonality in the landscaping and pest control operations creates cash flow gaps that require planning, not panic, but planning nonetheless. A customer who represents 31% of a single company's revenue is a concentration risk that wakes you up at 2 in the morning in a way that an index fund never will. Staffing is the hardest problem across every single one of these businesses, not capital, not competition, staffing. Finding people who show up, perform, and stay is the operational challenge that no acquisition multiple can fully price. This is the portfolio. 9 boring businesses, $1.6 million in annual take-home. Built through perception gaps, patient capital, and a system refined over time. The next question is how you find them, what you look at, and what you walk away from. The criteria come first. Before you look at a single listing, before you take a broker's call, before you drive past the building, you need a buying filter that you have written down and will not negotiate with yourself about in the moment. The moment is the wrong time to decide what you care about. You decide that before the moment. Here is the filter that built this portfolio. Essential demand. The business serves a need that does not go away when the economy softens. Pest control is not discretionary for a restaurant with a health inspection on the calendar. Commercial cleaning is not optional for a medical office with regulatory obligations. Document shredding is not something a law firm defers because Q3 was soft. Essential is not a feeling. It is a question. If revenue dropped 20% tomorrow, what would cause it? If the answer is economic sentiment or consumer preference, that is a signal. If the answer is a contract non-renewal or a key account leaving, that is a different kind of risk, one you can evaluate and price. Recurring customers. The business has contracts, repeat purchase cycles, or embedded switching costs that make customers stay without being resold. A company with 80% of revenue on annual service agreements is structurally different from a company that re-earns every dollar each month from scratch. The recurring number is one of the first things you ask for and one of the first things you verify against actual billing records. Simple operations. Not easy, simple. There is a difference. A business with 5 service lines, 3 revenue models, a product component, and a software subscription bolt-on is complicated. Complicated businesses require complicated transitions. Complicated transitions create windows for things to go wrong. You want a business where the operating model fits on one side of a whiteboard. You want to understand what creates the revenue and what costs exist to service it without a 2-hour briefing. Low capex needs. The business does not require continuous, heavy reinvestment to maintain its earning power. Equipment is maintained, not constantly replaced. The physical assets are functional and unglamorous. A fleet of commercial vans is fine. A manufacturing line requiring $400,000 in tooling upgrades every 3 years is a different conversation. Owner earnings are only as real as what remains after the business stays operational. That is the filter. Businesses that pass it are not rare, but they are not everywhere either. Finding them requires channels, and the channels are not equivalent. Brokers handle the listed deals. Business brokerage firms publish listings, typically on platforms like BizBuySell or through regional broker networks. The listed market is the most competitive part of the market because it is the most visible. You should still work it because deals exist there, but you should understand that a listing has already been seen by everyone running the same search you are. The broker's job is to close a deal. That is not a criticism. It is simply a fact that changes how you read the numbers they send you. Direct-to-owner outreach is where the unlisted market lives. You identify businesses through trade associations, local chamber directories, LinkedIn searches filtered by industry and tenure, and simple geographic proximity to markets you understand. You write a short, honest letter, not a form letter. Something that explains who you are, what you are looking for, and why you would be a good steward of what they built. Owners who are thinking about retirement but have not called a broker yet are often more receptive to this kind of outreach than they let on initially. Many of the businesses in this portfolio came from conversations that started with a letter and a follow-up phone call 6 months later. Local networks and industry forums are slower but meaningful. An accountant who works with small business owners in a specific sector. A banker who does SBA loans and hears about transitions before they become listings. A retired operator in a service industry who still attends the regional trade show every year and knows who is thinking about stepping back. These relationships take time. They also surface deals that never become public. You find a candidate. Now you look at it with a specific lens. Customer concentration is the number that changes everything. If one customer represents more than 20% of revenue, that customer is also a counterparty risk that must be priced into the deal or walked away from entirely. You ask whether the relationship is with the business or with the owner. If the answer is the owner, the revenue is not as transferable as the income statement suggests. Churn tells you whether customers are staying by choice or by inertia. Both can be acceptable. Only one of them is durable. You pull 2 to 3 years of customer lists, and you check whether the accounts from year 1 are still present in year 3. You ask what the trailing 12-month attrition looks like. You ask what the last 3 losses were and why. Pricing power is quieter. You ask when prices were last raised and by how much. You look at whether customers absorb the increase without friction. A business that has not raised prices in 4 years is either a business with extraordinary loyalty or one that is afraid to test the relationship. You need to know which. Operator dependence is the question underneath all the other questions. Remove the owner from the business for 90 days. What breaks? If the answer is everything, you are not buying a business, you are buying a job that comes with financing obligations. This is not automatically disqualifying if you are prepared to transition operationally and build management depth. But it changes the price you pay and the timeline you set. Due diligence on boring businesses has boring landmines. Licenses that are not transferable to a new owner. Insurance policies that lapse at closing unless you take specific steps. Payroll tax obligations that predate the sale and travel with the entity in a stock purchase. Tax filings with inconsistencies between the returns and the books, not always fraudulent, sometimes just messy, but messy creates liability. Contracts that have change of control clauses a seller forgot were in there or hoped you would not find. You read every contract. You read the licenses. You have a CPA review 3 years of returns. You have an attorney read the entity structure. None of this is exciting. All of it is necessary. Deal structures are the part most buyers underestimate. Seller financing is common in this market and often favorable. An owner who carries 20 to 30% of the purchase price is an owner who believes the business will perform after the sale. That is valuable information structured into the transaction itself. Earnouts tie a portion of the price to future performance, which transfers risk back to the seller on the revenue that is hardest to verify. Asset purchases protect you from inherited liabilities in most cases. Stock purchases are sometimes required for license continuity, which means the due diligence on what travels with the entity has to be thorough enough to justify the exposure. Negotiation levers are often softer than price. A seller who commits to a 6-month transition period is worth more than a seller who is gone in 30 days. A non-compete that covers the actual geography and customer base where the business operates is worth the legal fee to draft it properly. Working capital targets set at closing determine whether the business you receive is funded or running on fumes when you take the keys. The portfolio logic is straightforward once you have done one deal. One business at 3 times earnings is a concentrated bet on a single set of customers, a single management team, a single service line in a single market. 9 businesses, each bought at a fair but not heroic multiple, distribute that risk across hundreds of customer relationships, multiple geographies, and independent revenue streams. One contract lost at Henderson Document Shredding does not affect Lakewood Pest Solutions. One difficult season in landscaping does not impair medical billing. The diversification is not financial in the way an index fund diversifies. It is operational. The businesses do not move together. That is the point. You own 9 businesses now. The question is not whether you can manage them. The question is whether you have built a system that manages them so you do not have to be present in every one of them every day. The answer is the operating system. Before anything else, before the hiring decisions and the pricing conversations and the vendor calls, you establish the measurement layer. Each business has 5 to 7 key performance indicators. Revenue against prior year, gross margin, customer count, churn rate for the trailing 30 days, accounts receivable aging. Jobs completed versus jobs scheduled, these are not complicated numbers. They are the numbers that tell you whether the business is healthy or moving toward a problem before the problem becomes visible in the bank account. Every business owner sends you a 1-page scorecard on Monday morning. You read 9 scorecards. It takes 40 minutes. That is your operational oversight for the week. The scorecards are built on a shared template. The template exists in a shared folder. Every operator filled it in the same way from the first week of your ownership. Consistency across the portfolio is not optional. It is the system. Standard operating procedures are the other half of this. The pest control company has a protocol for every service call. The document shredding route has a protocol for chain of custody documentation. The medical billing operation has a protocol for claim submission timing and denial follow-up. These procedures exist not because the people running the businesses are not capable of judgment. They exist because consistent judgment, codified in writing, is transferable to the next person who takes the role. The procedure is the business. The person executing it can change. The procedure should not, then the people. Every business in this portfolio was owner-operated when you bought it. The owner was the sales team, the quality control department, the scheduler, and the mechanic when something broke. You cannot own 9 of those. You hire managers, promote the most capable person already in each operation, and you compensate them in a way that creates alignment. A base that is fair for the role. a bonus tied directly to the scorecard. If margin improves, the manager shares in it. If customer count grows, they see it in the quarterly number. People who are accountable to outcomes behave differently than people who are accountable to tasks. You want accountability to outcomes. You build that into the compensation structure on day one, and you do not change it without a conversation. You hold one call per business per week, 15 minutes. The scorecard is already in front of you. You ask 3 questions. What is working? What is not? What do you need from me? You write the answers in a simple log. You track whether you said you would do something and whether you did it. Credibility with the managers is the most important resource you have, because it is the only thing that makes the entire structure function when you are not in the building. Which is most days. Customer retention is not a project. It is a posture. You raise prices once per year, small increases, 5 to 8%, announced 30 days in advance with a brief explanation. Not an apology, an explanation. Costs have risen. The service level has not dropped. The relationship remains the priority. Most customers absorb it without friction. The ones who call to negotiate are the ones you talk to directly, because that conversation usually reveals something worth knowing about their situation or your service quality. You add 1 upsell per business per year. 1. Not a new service line requiring new equipment and new training and new insurance. A logical extension of what the business already does for the customers it already has. The pest control company offers a quarterly exterior treatment for accounts that were on biannual contracts. The document shredding company offers a hard drive destruction add-on for the clients that were already scheduling monthly pickups. Simple, adjacent, additive without complexity. Responsiveness is free and it matters more than most operators realize. You set a policy across every business in the portfolio. Every customer inquiry receives a response within 4 business hours. Not a resolution, a response. Someone acknowledged that you called, your question is being looked into. Someone will follow up. Customers leave service businesses most often not because of a failure, but because of silence following a failure. The silence is what converts a recoverable situation into a lost account. Cost controls are about structure, not willpower. Scheduling is compressed where geography allows it. The landscaping routes are organized by zone so that trucks are not crossing the city between stops. The pest control routes are scheduled by neighborhood on rotating days so that drive time is a fixed, predictable cost rather than an unmanaged one. Inventory is held at the minimum required to complete a week's work. Vendors are renegotiated annually, not aggressively. Professionally, you ask for pricing consistent with the volume your portfolio represents. In several cases, that volume is enough to move the conversation. Shared infrastructure is where the portfolio advantage becomes concrete. One bookkeeper handles the accounts for all 9 businesses in a standardized chart of accounts. One payroll processor handles all 9. One set of marketing templates, adjusted for local branding, covers the basics across the portfolio. One dispatch software platform is standard across the service businesses. The cost of these functions does not multiply by 9. It scales at roughly half that rate. That margin is real. It appears on the scorecard every month. Cash management is the discipline underneath the discipline. Every business maintains a reserve equal to 60 days of fixed costs. No exceptions. Debt service coverage is monitored monthly. A business that is servicing acquisition debt and thinning its coverage ratio gets attention before it gets to a problem. When to reinvest and when to distribute is not a feeling. It is a threshold. Coverage above 1.4 and reserve fully funded, excess cash moves to the portfolio level. Below that, it stays in the business. The rule is written down. You follow it the same way every time, because the same way every time is the only version of this that works across 9 businesses and 1 owner. You are not managing 9 businesses. You are managing 1 system. The businesses run inside it. 9 businesses, 1 system. Now, let us talk about what that system actually produces. The math is not complicated. It is just consistent, and consistency across 9 cash-flowing operations does something that 1 business never could. Start with the baseline. Each business in this portfolio generates between $180,000 and $340,000 in annual revenue. Owner earnings, what you actually take home after debt service, operator salaries, reserves, and reinvestment, average $178,000 per business at the lower end of the range. Across 9 businesses, that is approximately $1.6 million per year in distributions flowing to you. Not revenue, not gross profit, distributions. Money that has already passed through the reserve requirement, cleared the debt service coverage threshold of 1.4, and has no remaining obligation on it. The distribution policy is not complicated either. Cover fixed costs. Fund the 60-day reserve. Service the debt. If what remains clears the threshold, it moves up. You do not squeeze businesses that need capital. You do not hoard cash in businesses that are generating excess. The policy is the rule. The rule runs the same way every month. Now the compounding. In year one, you take $1.2 million and you reinvest 400,000 of it into paying down acquisition debt across the portfolio. Debt service drops, coverage ratios improve. Distributions in year two increase. The cash that used to go to principal now goes to you. That is not growth from operations. That is the mechanical effect of debt retirement on a cash flowing system. Both types of growth are happening simultaneously. They are not the same kind. They are both real. By year 5, several of these businesses have been in your portfolio long enough that a buyer would value them differently than you valued them at acquisition. You bought at 3 to 4 times owner earnings. A strategic buyer, a private equity roll-up, a competitor looking for market share in a geography they do not currently serve may offer 5 to 7 times. You do not have to sell, but the option is not theoretical. Now the risks. They are real and they deserve a direct conversation. Key person risk is the first one. If your pest control manager leaves, that business is exposed until you replace them. If the medical billing specialist who knows the denial workflow exits in the same quarter your bookkeeper goes on leave, you are managing 2 gaps at once. The mitigation is documented procedures and a bench. You cross-train. You build relationships with your second-in-command in every operation. You do not wait for a vacancy to start thinking about who fills it. Regulatory change is the second. Medical billing lives inside a compliance environment that shifts. Document shredding has chain of custody requirements that can tighten. If a municipality changes licensing requirements for pest control operators, that affects your margins until you adapt. You do not operate in one regulatory environment. You operate in 9. That is not a reason to avoid these businesses. It is a reason to stay current, maintain professional relationships in each industry, and budget for compliance costs the same way you budget for equipment maintenance. Reputation shocks happen. A bad review sits on Google for 3 years. A disgruntled former employee posts publicly. A service failure that you would have handled immediately gets amplified before you know it happened. The answer is response speed and genuine accountability. You do not respond defensively. You respond honestly. The customers watching how you handle a failure are forming an opinion about the business. Handle it correctly and the failure becomes evidence of character. Handle it poorly and it compounds. Diversification across industry and geography is not incidental to this portfolio. It is a structural feature. When one sector slows, others do not necessarily slow with it. When one local economy softens, businesses in a different market absorb the difference. You are not concentrated. Concentration is how single business operators absorb shocks that spread owners do not feel. On ethics, this is not a separate topic from operations. It is operations. Fair wages are not a concession to external pressure. They are retention policy. Safe working conditions are not regulatory compliance. They are respect made concrete. Honest marketing, meaning you describe what you do accurately and you deliver what you describe, is the only version of customer relationships that compounds over time. Customers who feel misled do not come back. Customers who feel respected do. The math on that is not subtle. When you eventually decide what to do next, you have 3 clear options and they are not mutually exclusive. Hold and distribute. You keep all 9 businesses, continue the operating system, draw the distributions, and retire the debt. The portfolio becomes progressively less leveraged and more cash generative every year. This is the quiet version. Most people never hear about it. Sell individually, one business at a time, when a buyer emerges who values it at a multiple above your basis. You take the proceeds, deploy them, and continue with the remaining 8. Package the portfolio. A buyer acquires the whole system, not just the assets but the operating infrastructure, the managers, the scorecards, the procedures. A portfolio of 9 managed businesses is worth more to certain buyers than 9 separate businesses sold independently. You built the system. The system has value. If you are at the beginning of this, here is the practical roadmap. Spend the first 30 days learning one industry. One niche. Read the trade publications. Talk to 3 operators who are not selling. Understand the cost structure before you underwrite the first deal. Spend the next 30 days building a sourcing list. Business brokers, direct outreach to owners, industry associations, retirement announcements in local business journals. In the final 30 days, run your first underwriting on a real listing. Not a hypothetical, a real number. Even if you do not make an offer, the exercise is the education. The first deal does not need to be large. It needs to be real. A business doing $400,000 in revenue with clean books and a manager who wants to stay is a better first acquisition than a $2 million business with complexity you cannot yet see. Pick one boring niche. Start sourcing. Subscribe for the next breakdown because the next one goes deeper on how to underwrite the first deal without paying for mistakes that experienced buyers already made for you.